In this episode of the Church Security Roll Call, we're going to be discussing hurricane safety. Stay tuned. Hi, this is Chris with Sheepdog Church Security, and this is your Church Security Roll Call. Today we're going to be discussing the article, Categorically Dangerous. If you'd like to read that article, go to our website, sheepdogchurchsecurity.net, and look under the News tab. Today's verse that I have for you is Matthew 7, verses 23 through 26, and it reads like this. A wise man built his house upon a rock, and the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. A foolish man built his house upon the sand. The rain descended, the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. So we're talking about hurricanes, because as you well know, hurricane season is just around the corner. Peak season is towards the end of August, early September. And so this is just a good time for all of us to kind of think about it again, dust off our communication plans, dust off our response plans to be ready for this season. Because if you're in and around the area of like the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic coast, specifically more in the southern region, we need to be prepared because we know from history that these things can be extremely dangerous. So before we continue, I just want to take a moment. If you live in those regions or, you know that you're in an area that's susceptible to hurricanes or even the fallout of hurricanes. To give you an example, I used to live in Huntsville, Alabama, which is right at the north end of Alabama. And when we were living down there, a hurricane, don't ask me which one, and don't ask me what year because it's all very jumbled in my mind. But anyway, we were living there, and a hurricane came in, and I think it was, I don't know if it came off the coast or if it came off of near Florida. But anyway, the point was this, is by the time this storm system that now was it was no longer a hurricane, but the hurricane caused it, came up into northern Alabama, and it knocked a tree into my house, falling into my roof and falling into my bedroom, and required lots of work. But anyway, and so you could still be, like I said, it's not a hurricane, but you're still going to get the fallout from it. So anyway, let me give you some stories here in the news. Oh, I'm sorry, let me go back a little bit. Go ahead and share this video with your entire team, with staff and volunteers, especially if you're in one of these areas, and make sure that you get the show notes. The show notes are just a way for you to have kind of like a cheat sheet, right? So after you and everybody else has watched this, now you have this cheat sheet that you can kind of walk around and keep the conversation going, at least for a week, to discuss how you guys might need to prepare and might need to look at these kind of things. So anyway, let's jump into the news. Louisiana, August 27th, 2020 and August 29th, 2021. Laura and Ida, two Category 4 hurricanes a year apart, damaged churches in Louisiana to varying degrees. Some buildings were destroyed, some survived with serious damage, others with moderate and light damage. All were inconvenienced. Still, they found ways to help not only their own members, but also members of the community. These churches were also prepared for hurricanes. For instance, United Methodist congregations had secured digital copies of records on file with the conference, and the conference helped congregations with cleanup and rebuilding. So I wanted to stop here a little bit. We have to have secure records. We need to be prepared. One of the things is this, is my house could be completely leveled, and all I would have to do is get my hands on another computer with internet access, and I wouldn't miss a beat in running Sheepdog Church Security Academy. Churches need to operate in that same way. A lot of us have these file cabinets where we keep financial records and other important documentation. If you lost all of that, if, like I said, if your church was flattened and there was no way you were ever going to have your hands on those paper copies again, and that could be fire, tornado, anything, Do you have them backed up? Are they on in the web, on the cloud? Are they, backed up on some server somewhere? What's your backup plan on these? A good way of looking at these kind of things is this. Is you really go in, you talk to your financial people, your legal people, that kind of stuff, and say, if we lost all of these, which records would be the most crippling to lose? What would be the worst thing ever, and it would cripple the church and would take a long time to recover? And whatever their answer is, that has to be, how do we fix this? Do we get a scanner? Do we develop a record system, a filing system on a exterior drive like on Google Drive or OneDrive, and I'm sure Apple has their version of it. What's our plan there? Do we, can we at least get access to those? You want to be at least to where I'm at. So for me, it's all about the online academy, the videos that we have there. I have those stored 3 different areas. And like I said, my house could be flattened. This computer could be lost. My computer out in the living room could be lost forever and ever. And all I would need is access to the internet, and it would all be recovered, and I wouldn't miss a beat. If the church has records that are that sensitive, they need to be backed up. All right, next one is Belton in Houston, Texas, August 26, 2017. Thousands of people fled north as Hurricane Harvey approached the South Texas coast. When it made landfall near Corpus Christi, many of the refugees have found shelter in churches. For example, in Belton, about 30 miles north of Austin, the Church of Christ set up folding beds in its gymnasium, and the First Baptist Church also made accommodations for displaced persons. Closer to Harvey's path, churches that escaped flooding in Houston were welcome storm-displaced people. These and other churches had already planned and prepared for mass evacuation emergencies. They had procured supplies, to include beds, and trained volunteers to meet the needs of those fleeing the disasters. So you might be one of these churches, and where you're actually set up to help the greater community. But even if you're not, have you at least looked at your congregation? How many people in your congregation might be looking to the church for help because their house is now unlivable? Can you put up cots for at least the people in your congregation? Do you have a plan there? It's something that we all should consider. I think, we've talked in the past, there's other things, right? Tornadoes, there could be wildfires, there could be gas leaks or hazardous material leaks. And if the church is set up in the position to at least help their own congregation, to me, that would be a good thing. So you don't need to open up to the community. That's great. That's awesome. But if not, at least are you set up for your congregation? Next thing, Atlantic Coast, United States, October 6th through the 8th, 2016. Hurricane Matthew, which had been a Category 5 when it hit several Caribbean islands, was a Category 4 when it reached Florida. Brushing the Florida coast, the center stayed over water and closely followed the coastline as it headed north, gradually weakening. Along the way, it took down power lines in several states, pounded coastal areas with storm surges, and flooded inland areas. Churches in low-lying areas canceled Sunday services. Churches on higher ground and further inland provided shelter for evacuees and housed rescued and relief workers. So once again, just an area that's was hit and power lines went down, and it just requires a plan, right? We just have to have some sort of plan, and this really applies to anyone. So here in Minnesota, I have no idea what the hurricane would have to be for me to be affected in Minnesota from a hurricane. But this still applies to tornadoes and all those other things. So we at least have to have a plan. But since we are talking about hurricanes, let's continue on. Just a quick review of hurricane categories. Okay, so Hurricane Category 1 is sustained winds from 74 miles an hour to 95 miles an hour. And and these happen. These are extremely common. This is probably just another day living in hurricane land. It just happens all the time. But what is your plan for that? One of the things I want to talk about, and I'm kind of jumping ahead here a little bit, is your communication plan. So you probably know this already, but when the authorities are recommending people to take certain steps, either to bring in lawn furniture and things that might fly away in these kind of winds, or those kind of plans. What happens is they come out with these announcements, but when the church comes out and says, hey, just a reminder, this might be a good time to bring in your furniture and tape up your windows or board up your windows or stuff like that, people are something like 75% more likely to do it. And so as a safety guy, as a safety ministry guy, I think it's very important for us to kind of amen, if you will, to endorse these warnings, these steps, because people are more likely to do them, and therefore they are more safe. And so that's something for you to consider. Sometimes echoing what the recommendations are is extremely good. The other thing I think about is this. There is a certain population of the church that relies very heavily on the church for many things. And so they might have not, they may have missed the weather report. They may have missed all this kind of stuff or whatever. But if the church sends them an email, which they open every single time, or whatever your communication plan is, they're then going to see it. You might be the only source that tells them to batten down the hatches and get ready for this storm. So don't ever overlook that. Maybe you're very computer savvy. Maybe you got a smartphone and has all your alerts. Maybe you have a weather radar or a weather radio in your house. Maybe you're wired that way. Just keep in mind, a lot of people aren't wired that way. And so you adding to the warnings and the advice is going to be helpful to them. All right, so that's category 1. You're probably guaranteed to see those. Category 2 hurricanes, that's 96 miles an hour to 110 miles an hour. These are listed as extremely dangerous and commonly make landfall in the U.S. So this is a common occurrence. So your category 1s are probably, that's completely normal to you. Category 2, now it's like, okay, here's something more that we have to be prepared for. So what is your communication plan for that? And what is your advice that you're going to give other people? And also, what is the advice you're going to give to the church, right? As far as, what's our plan for bringing in chairs and tables, or, I don't know what you have outside your church. Garbage cans. I don't know. What things need to be secured for a Category 2 hurricane? And that's very common in those areas. All right, you get at least statistically, now the next level is Category 3, and statistically we can expect one of these per year. So this is 111 miles an hour to 129 miles an hour. These are your big ones. You're certainly the ones that you need to take steps. Once again, communication plan, and what are you going to do? I think about things like taping windows or boarding up windows and that kind of stuff. The church has to have a plan. Is it volunteers that are covering up the windows? Is it the facilities department that's taking care of that? Still, as the safety guy, what kind of communication is going on here? What are we telling our elderly or people that are at risk in our congregation of what steps they should be taking? Is there an evacuation order or a recommendation for evacuation? Then what is it that they're doing? We need to check up on people. I don't know if you're wired this way, but I certainly am. There's a lot of, you could feel completely confident in what you're doing and what your plan is for yourself. You can be completely confident in what the plan is for the church to do what they need to do to prepare their building for this type of, for the Category 3 hurricane. But what about the other people in your congregation? What are they prepared for? What is their ability level? If somebody has to evacuate, and just to use a straw man type of argument, you got an 83-year-old woman who lives alone in her small house on Hurricane Street, and is she going outside and putting boards over her windows? Or if she has to evacuate, is she climbing behind the wheel of a 1980s Cadillac and driving 100 miles on her own with her dog and important belongings? Who's helping her achieve that? And I really think that it's the church's responsibility, any houses of worship responsibility, to ensure people like that are being taken care of. I mean, it's the mission, isn't it? So that's once a year. Now, Category 4, devastating Category 4. This is 130 to 156 miles per hour. They are not unusual, but they're not an every year event. So depending on where you live and how long you've lived there, you've seen your share of Category 4 hurricanes. And you know about the frequency they occur. And you know how devastating they are. And so once again, we're coming to that point. What's your communication plan? And then what is your plan to help people that need help? And also, what are you doing at the church for the church to make sure that it's ready for this type of event? Category 5 storms, 157 miles per hour or higher. This is Hurricane Michael in 2016. They're very catastrophic, and but thankfully are not common. And so I guess the takeaway is this, is communication, realizing that no communication is necessarily wasted communication. We have to get that out of our mind. Also, too, you cannot assume that your capacity or your capability of handling these kind of events are somehow common knowledge. And so you have to be prepared to, what are you going to do for the church? What are you going to do for the congregation? And just think of how much work could be involved in all this, and that's why you need a plan, and you need lots of people to participate in this, because it is more than just boarding up the windows at the church and bringing in things that are likely to fly away. It's also, it's grandma and grandpa, it's people with special needs, it's people with mobility issues, it's amening the evacuation plans or preparation plans, where other people that are kind of on the fence are encouraged now by the email that you sent out or by the notification that you sent out, so they take proper steps. Now, a lot of this was kind of based on the idea of what I've said is based on the idea this is happening during the week or something. But if it's overlapping on a Sunday or whatever day of the week that you guys meet, is now you have to, what's the communication plan there? That's a cancellation plan. Hopefully you already have a services cancellation plan in place for extreme weather situations or dangerous situations, because like I've said, so I'm here in Minnesota, and I do not want people driving on the road when the roads are absolutely destroyed by ice and snow. It'd be very silly for somebody to get hurt trying to get to church when they really shouldn't even been trying, right? They should have just stayed home that day. And once again, this just comes back to what I've been saying before. Your communication plan, be it phone, email, whatever it is, announcements during the service, whatever it is, needs to be strong. And it's more than just letting them know that, there's some special event coming up, or these are all the events that are coming up. It also has to be about, what are you doing to stay safe? I really think, a lot of churches will have like that a newsletter or some sort of email that goes out on a regular basis, whatever it is. I'm a firm believer that the safety ministry should have a slot on that newsletter and just talk about what's going on, things they need to think about, and that kind of ongoing advice, your safety moment, your whatever you want to call it, to help them prepare. So I hope all that makes sense to you. I hope it helps you. Really, for you that are in these kind of areas, you're probably already on target. It's just now's the time, right, to dust off the communication plan, to dust off the overall plan of what to do in case that category 3, 4, 5 is bearing down on you. Get that out. Have that conversation again with your leadership, with your board, with your staff, with your volunteers, with your safety team, to really make sure everybody's on target. So when it does happen and you put out those notifications, you're communicating with people, they already know because you already did that review with them. Other than that, I do have a special announcement. If you are an active student with us right now, either by individual or through, like the team safety, your church is signed up for the team safety member certification, or maybe your preferred member. Something you want to know, something you want to look at right away is this. We just released the mass trauma course. It's just added. It doesn't cost you any money. It's nothing. It's just boom. It's right there now for you. So we have 8 courses now. Mass trauma is one of them, to plan for these type of events. Let's say the worst case scenario, I don't know what it is. Maybe people are sheltering at your church and the worst possible scenario occurs, and now you have a mass trauma event, or maybe it's active shooter, maybe it's a tornado, maybe whatever it is, I don't know. But that's added now to help you to save as many lives as possible. So make sure you check that out. If your certification has expired or whatever, this might be a good time to jump back in there, review all those other courses you have already gone through. They've probably been updated since you went through them. And then, of course, getting that extra mass trauma is really going to help you and your church take your safety ministry to the next level. Other than that, if you like this video, please comment, share, like, all that stuff helps. And gosh, I forgot his name. There's a pastor out there. Pastor, he always comments and he's got a ministry going on. Pastor, I'm totally sorry. I missed you. But if anyone goes into the comment section of YouTube, you're going to see this guy. He comments, he likes a lot of stuff. He's got his own ministry going on. I haven't really completely checked him out, but he's definitely into safety and security. And he, of course, supports us all the way. Thank you, Pastor. I want to say Ron, but I'm 90% sure I'm wrong. But anyway, other than that, thank you so much for joining us today. And hey, let's be careful out there. This program is made for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice.